So welcome to Camino Wisdom Stories for June 2023. And we're going to be talking about pilgrimage mindset today. And we have a special guest that I'd like to introduce. Her name is Deborah Weltman. Deborah is an author, an artist, a very creative, artistic person. She walked a Camino in 2011. And Adam and I met Deborah after Amy Horton, who's here. Amy had invited Adam and I to talk about the hero's journey and the Camino as a hero's journey to her St. Louis chapter. And at the end of that, she said, and our next event will be Deborah, and she's going to be speaking. And the topic sounded so interesting to both Adam and I that we both joined about a week later. And we're just so impressed with Deborah, with her book, and we've been excited to share her with you. So welcome, Deborah. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And I want to ask everybody to, please forgive me because I'm nervous. And when I get nervous, I tend to forget words. So if I get to that point and I'm losing words, holler them out to me.
And you're in good company. Nobody here is going to judge you. And I get that piece about feeling nervous.
Thanks for that introduction, Kathy. So after that webinar, I went and ordered Deborah's book, Camino Lessons. Here it is. And it arrived the day that I was flying out somewhere. And I just opened it and there were lots of pictures in it. And I was flicking through it. And there was dates, and I noticed that it said 2011. And so I couldn't read the book at all, but curiosity got the better of me. And I just flipped through the pictures and I thought, I wonder if, because it said May 2011, I wonder if Deborah finished her Camino the same day as I did in May 2011. And so I flipped through the pictures right to the end to look for I'm sure there's a Compostela or a Credencial in the back here, and lo and behold, I found it. And yes, it was exactly the same day that I finished my first Camino in May 2011. So I feel a connection. And we were talking earlier, and I said I arrived in Santiago late afternoon, and Deborah said the same time. So the possibility is that Deborah and I were in the same space at the same time all those years ago. And out of curiosity too, I went online just now to see how many pilgrims arrived into Santiago. So how many American pilgrims arrived into in that month in May 2011 from the States, and it was 484. In the whole year in 2011, the number of American pilgrims that arrived in Santiago was 3,728 in the whole year. This year, right up until yesterday, 6,950 pilgrims arrived from America into Santiago. So it shows it's doubled in number. And that got me thinking about how in chapter 2, Deborah, you say about the call. The call to adventure signifies that destiny has summoned the hero. And you say that the hero's journey is begun when the hero is summoned. It's hard to think of myself as the hero, but I did receive a call. So I'd like to ask you, what was that call that you received? I think more and more people are going on Camino, and we see that with the numbers. But I'm curious with yourself, all those years ago, what was the call for you?
I will give you the short version because it's in the book, but it was a divine threat. And the threat was that if I didn't walk the Camino that year, the year I was going to turn 60, my life would be forfeit. And that got my attention. And I was journaling at the time, and I sat and journaled about what that might mean because I was pretty freaked out about it. And what I came up with was that it didn't feel like I was going to die, but that somehow if I didn't walk the Camino before I turned 60, that my life wouldn't be as rich as it could be. That things that, maybe if things were planned out in advance for my life, for each of our lives, then all the plans would not come to fruition. So it was enough to get me motivated.
Yeah. And why the Camino? So why was the magic with the Camino? Where did that come from? Because, so many other things we can do.
Mm-hmm. When I first heard about the Camino, it was about 10 years before that. And I had read Shirley MacLaine's book, The Camino, A Journey of Spirit. And you have to understand that I was not raised in a Catholic tradition. I was raised Jewish. I knew hardly anybody who was Catholic because in my community, the Jewish kids all went to public school and the Catholic kids went to the Catholic schools. And the only understanding I had ever had about pilgrimage was from in high school reading Canterbury Tales. So I knew nothing about this. So when I read Shirley MacLaine's book, and all of a sudden felt this like feeling of my heart was swelling and excitement and like I really want to do this. I was shocked. I surprised myself. And that the funny thing was that feeling of really wanting to do it never went away. It kind of got tamped down, when real life came in and took place, and there were things that I had to do to make a living and take care of my kids and that kind of thing. But I never stopped wanting to go do the Camino. And so in interim years, the 10 years between the time I first heard about the Camino and the time that I actually went, I would talk to people about it all the time. I would bring it up in conversation. Someday I really want to walk the Camino. And oftentimes there would be somebody who knew somebody who had walked the Camino, and I would find books at the library that they seemed to fall off the shelf at me. It like kept coming up. And the can I tell the next part of the story?
Yeah, absolutely. Tell you absolutely.
Okay, so after I got the divine threat and I'm sitting journaling for a while, I had the thought that I've been talking about this for 10 years and haven't made any forward motion. I need to somehow let God know I'm serious. What can I do? So I thought, well, I'm going to go write the dates in my calendar. And, I may not have it right, but at least I will have made this commitment on paper and I'm showing that I'm interested. So I go get my little pocket calendar out of my purse and I get ready to write the dates in it. Well, at that point, the calendar was rubber banded to the calendar from the previous year, which fell open to a note that I had written 11 months ago to call Bill, who has walked the Camino, and it had Bill's phone number in there. So it was just like that. It happened. And there was this synchronicity about having made the commitment, and now I'm going to be supported. And so that's the beginning of this pilgrimage pattern that I've been writing about and that we're going to talk about today. And it was great because Bill, I called him right away and he agreed to meet with me. 3 days later, we were sitting in Starbucks and he was showing me his Camino photos. So it was a wonderful way to begin.
I know, in the book, you mentioned Joseph Campbell and Hero's Journey and such like, and from what we do, it's that meeting of the mentor, isn't it? And you talk, I think, in the book of nudges that have pushed you along. But there's that, in the Hero's Journey, you have crossing the threshold before you get to Spain. What were some of the obstacles that you, the real life obstacles that you had to face to get you from, okay, I've made the decision, but now let's get into practice, put it into reality?
In that 10-year period that I had planned someday to walk the Camino, I had never saved any money. I had my own business, which meant that I didn't have paid vacation. And I had a kid at home still. I wasn't in shape. I hadn't been walking, so I wasn't prepared. And I didn't even own a backpack. I didn't own hiking boots. I was so completely unprepared. So now those aren't life-shattering issues, but there were a lot of just big issues for me.
Yeah. And how did you, looking back now with all this hindsight, as the person that you were back then, can you, if you do that oh, I can say I was a different person. Do you know what I mean? What was your way of being in that sense before Camino?
I was starting to step into a spiritual phase of my life after having rejected religion for 20, 30 years. And then I don't think I ever thought about spirituality, although in the occasion that I might go outdoors somewhere and I might have this feeling of being touched by the nature world. So I think that was where my spiritual self was. But probably right around the time when I first read Shirley MacLaine's book, I had been introduced to a whole bunch of other reading material on spiritual development through a friend of mine who also had a spiritual discussion group going. So this is the phase I was in. I was in spiritual study period, hoping to do something for my spiritual growth.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'd say somewhere it was about giving to yourself or your needs. I think the real, what did you want from your Camino journey? The reason why.
I think I think I felt that it was something that was like the important next phase in my life, and that I didn't know why, but I knew there was some reason that it was going to make a difference in my life. But at that point, I didn't really know why. I just felt like there was something there for me. If anything, I thought there were going to be learnings, and then there would be opportunities to teach. Beyond that, I don't think to get more specific.
Yeah, I think I think I can resonate with that. It's like I can remember leaving, for me, on that May time, it was like, leave the front door. I don't know what's going to come next. I'll just embrace the unknown. So when you jumped on that plane and left Chicago and landed in Paris, what happened next? What were some of the experiences that you had, and assumptions, expectations, and all of that? Were they met? Or
it got easier once I got there. I spent so much time preparing and being afraid that once I was there, it was like, I got part of this covered. Okay. And then once I got into Saint Jean Pied de Port, I met other pilgrims. Then it started to feel like what I thought the pilgrimage would be. The first group of people that I met, they asked they were kind enough to find a place, an albergue for us to all stay that night, which was great. Of course, that was my first exposure to the snorers. And so, that was the beginning of that part of the Camino. And, but we went out to dinner together. We had our first evening, we talked about our spiritual paths. And we went to a pilgrim's mass together. And again, I was not raised Catholic, but I remembered feeling really good and just really blessed by having been at that mass. That they prayed for all of us, and they mentioned the names of all the countries we had come from. And I felt like I was part of a very special group. It just felt like a wonderful beginning. And then the fact that it's fairy tale land. I mean, Saint Jean, it's just like walking into a fairy tale. So much of the Camino felt that way to me.
Yeah. Well, it's that unknown, isn't it? It's something that's completely new. But the Camino isn't meant to be easy. I truly, it's so. So, what did you face that really challenged you on the walk? And
the first day walking from Saint Jean to Orison, I faced what it turned out to be altitude sickness, but I didn't know it at the time. And I remember feeling like my heart was beating out of my chest, and I could walk 10 steps, and then I had to stop and rest. And I had tried to hike some hills in St. Louis, but we don't have mountains, so I did my best, but I was not prepared for that altitude. And so the funny part of it was when I finally got to Orison, and I was sitting on the deck overlooking that beautiful the mountain ranges in the distance, and somebody walked up to me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, yeah, I'm okay. And then later I went into the ladies' room and looked at myself and my lips were white. I was like, oh, that's why they asked. I don't have any oxygen in me. I sit down. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, that first day. I mean, for those that don't know, Orison is a albergue 8 kilometers, 5 miles from Saint Jean, and it's a wonderful little place. But yeah, no, that does answer the question. I think of the Pyrenees as the threshold into the Camino journey. But then, it's, I mean, did you, because I remember you were reading the book, that you were walking on a budget. You're walking on a budget, financial budget. And there were moments when you didn't have the money or something ran out and you had to trust.
Yes.
What stories did you gain? What did you gain from that experience?
I had been worried about money the entire time. I had to ask people for help to go on the Camino in the first place, because like I said, I hadn't saved up for anything. And I was rewarded by finding out that there were a lot of people who loved me enough to want me to have this big dream of mine come true, and that felt that this was that, because I expressed myself about how meaningful this was to me and how this was going to, it felt like, make the difference in my life. People stepped up and helped me. So I had help. I had people who helped me with my plane travel by donating frequent flyer miles. I had all kinds of help. And I had money. I had a credit card with me. But when I ran out of money, which I kind of figured it would happen at some point, my intention was to use the credit card to get a cash advance. And that's when I learned that you have to have a PIN number to be able to get a cash advance. And I didn't have the PIN number with me. And my kid, who was at home, was actually out of town at that moment. So there was no way she could go to the file drawer and look it up for me. So one of my wonderful Camino friends at that point came up with a suggestion that I could use the credit card like at restaurants. And he suggested we would go to dinner together, the whole group of us. At that point, it was a good-sized group. And I would pay for the meal with my credit card, and they would all reimburse me in cash. And so things like that got me through the Camino. But this was my first time to travel alone. And there were so many things I was afraid of. And this was the biggest thing, probably, plus getting lost, that I was afraid about. And then to have it happen, and then it worked out. It was like, okay, check that one off. I guess I don't need to be afraid of that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to so much of the Camino as that archetypal hero's journey, where that great fear, we face it, and the death and, so to speak, the rebirth, which we've spoken about before on these calls. And I mean, I think that is the gift of the Camino, where we see a different perspective. So yeah. And so I'm going to hand over to Kathy shortly, but if there was one tip you were going to give from that you're looking back now from that Camino experience, what would you say?
Actually, it's the pre-Camino, the asking for help, because I think it is so relevant to all of us in all of our lives. If you ask for help for something that's really important to you, if it's something that's meaningful to you in your life, and you let people know that you want their help, and that any form of help is perfect, including prayers, you will be surprised by how many people will jump in and want to help you, and it makes you feel very beloved.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. I think that's a lovely place to end from me.
Well, I wanted to do a little section here. I'm excited about this because you and I both have a love of The Artist's Way. And this is a book that has been important to you. You talk, and I guess I want to just do a play on words here, because one of the meanings, of course, of the Camino is the way. as we all know. And so I thought it might be fun to do a little section on the artist's way. And you write in your book, let me pull it out here real quick.
Good, remind me.
Pardon me?
I said, that's good, remind me what I wrote.
Yeah. You say, in 2008, I began to read and study The Artist's Way, a spiritual path to higher creativity. It also has another subtitle, A Course in Discovering and Recovering Your Creative Self, it says at the top. The Creativity Course by Julia Cameron. I blossomed by doing the work, journaling 3 pages of download every morning and taking myself on a personal and private weekly artist date to fill my creative well. I was introduced to the concepts of synchronicity, healthy anger, compassion for self, and the benefit of losing a perfectionist mindset. Most importantly, I learned that God wanted us all to be creative. And I love that. I just wanted to open this section up for all kinds of creative questions. And I guess the first thing that comes to me, it's not even written down here, but do you see your life as a piece of art? Do you live your, like, is it kind of a canvas, or do you see it creatively in any way like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think living life, I don't know if I'd see it as art, but you definitely have a better life if you're creative about how you live it. I think one of the big problems generally in society is this notion that there's a certain way that things have to be done. And so for me, the thought of creative mindset is like, how many ways can I think of to do this, to accomplish this? And then, if I'm trying to do something with somebody else, how many things can we come up with to try? And which ones do we feel are going to be the best to do together? So there's a lot of creative approaches. I guess that's what I would say. I think a good life would be led by coming at it with creative approach.
Yeah. And I think the next question I have for you, I think you're speaking to it. I wonder if you'd like to say anything more about it. How impactful was that book for you and working through that? It's a book, but it's really a course. Mm-hmm. How impactful was that for you initially? And then also just in how you see life with an artist or creative mindset?
It was just what I needed. And what was interesting to me about it was that, so the things that you're supposed to do in Artist's Way, like the homework, you're supposed to read your weekly chapter, there's questions in the back of it you're supposed to answer. You're supposed to do 3 pages of journaling every morning, a download. You're not trying to write the great American novel, but you're just supposed to see what's in your brain and kind of let it come out onto the page. And you're supposed to do an artist date. And what that is something you make a plan to go do by yourself for the purpose of filling up your creative well. So for me, it was oftentimes embarrassing to say, going to the antique mall and walking around and just look, because I enjoyed it. But what came out of doing the Artist's Way for me, first of all, I learned some techniques that I still use that help me a lot when I'm trying to figure out what I want next, or, oh my God, just journaling generally is a great way to deal with emotions. I get angry on the page instead of at people. It's real helpful. It's also, I also found it helpful to walk off anger, but that's another topic. So in terms of my creativity, what I got from the Artist's Way, I'll tell you a couple of techniques I learned. One was, you talk about, okay, I'm going to go to my notes because it's going out of my head. There's a section in there about what you do if you're doing your 3 morning pages, your 3 journal pages, and you can't think of anything else to write. And her suggestion is that you write, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And you do that until an idea pops into your head. I noticed that that would happen to me usually after the third, I don't know what to write. And that there was kind of a feeling that like of coming forth in my brain. Well, one night I wasn't writing and I just felt this feeling of something coming forth in my brain. So I got paper and a pen and a story started to come forth. And it turned out that I wasn't doing the artist's way to further my visual art, but that indeed I was doing it to work on writing, which I didn't know I wanted to do, but it turned out I did. And so that story, I let it come out onto the page, and it turned out to be a young adult fiction novel, a quest novel, kind of a form of pilgrimage. And that I have that completed now, the start on the second book and an idea for the third book in the series. And I have this feeling now when I sit down to write, like I know that something's coming through me. It's like they talk about the muses, and the muse of writing is like they're helping me sometimes. One of the other techniques that I got out of doing journaling regularly is called automatic writing or direct writing. And it's a way of contacting a higher source, which you can think of as God, you can think of as angels, you can think of as your higher self. It could be your subconscious. It's just not your normal conscious mind. And the way it works, I'll try to do a brief description. You have a question in mind. You write down your question in your notebook. I close my eyes and take a big breath and relax. And I try to see like a blank screen in my mind and listen. And a few words will come into my mind. I open my eyes or write those down, close my eyes again, blank screen, a couple more words, write those down. And I try not to connect the words, but I just keep closing my eyes and going to blank screen again and listening. And then when the words seem to stop coming, I'll ask silently, is there more? And if I'm told no, that's the end of it. Then I go and look at what I've written. And later on, I hope to share some of my automatic writing learnings with you. But it was what helped me to be calm when I was freaking out about what was going to work or not work about going on the Camino. Doing the automatic writing and asking those questions gave me really helpful advice. And it's always loving and it feels like spiritual advice. It's not specific, like, go to talk to so-and-so at 3 p.m. and ask for a loan. It's not like that. But anyway, I'll give you examples later. So the artist's way, in addition to giving me those really useful tools, I got some understandings of myself and earlier parts of my life about who it was worth me listening to and when it was better for me to listen to myself. Yeah, I mean, talk about teachers who were in your past who were either helpful or not. And I remembered one art teacher one time asking him a question. I said, I have this idea and I want to do this kind of a painting. And it's sort of like something's there, but it's not there. And I described it a little bit. And he goes, oh, you can't do that. And later on, I thought about it and I thought, he can't do that. I could figure out how to do it because I can imagine it. But, so it was helpful to understand who to trust and who not to trust too.
Nice. I love all of those things that you've just mentioned and how they supported you in preparing for the Camino. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing is like finding a deeper sense of who you really are and giving you some guidance and some steps to stay connected to yourself and find your own wisdom or wisdom from a source that you really trusted.
Well said.
That. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to, so you come home from the Camino, and that it's all in the book. You come home, but what's not in the book is the writing of the book, right? Because that comes later. So I'm curious, had you always wanted to write a book, or where did the idea come from? When did that come in for you?
I had the idea to write a book, but it was going to be a different book.
Oh.
And the book originally, the idea was based on this experience of having asked all these people for help and receiving help and how loved I felt. And so I had a title for it, and it was going to be Walking My Camino, asking stories of asking for help and receiving it. I think that was it. And my goal was to find other people who had had a similar experience and have all of our stories in there so that people would get comfortable with this idea that asking for help isn't a sign that you're, less than. It's a sign that, you're loved and people want to support you in being your best self. So that was the original thought. But when I got back from the Camino, I had had one experience where a couple of my Camino friends played a practical joke on me, and I was really not happy with them. And I joked with them back and I said, hey, when I get home, I'm going to write this story up. You guys will be the villains, or something like that. I was, and when I got home, I did write up the story. And to my surprise, the ending that presented itself to me was not that they were villains, but that they were like angels in disguise, because they pushed me out of this comfortable little nest of walking with my friend pilgrims to walking by myself and having the experiences that I came to the Camino, the rest of the experiences I came to have.
It sounds like in the reflection, in the writing of the Camino, that you got more clarity about like a deeper sense of something that was happening, or you got lessons from it or something like that.
I think everything stood out more clearly than it had while I was in it. And the advantage I had was that I had written morning pages, the journal pages, before I went. I'd written them for years before I even thought I was going to go. And I had written journal pages while I was on the Camino and when I got home. So I had all this information I could mine for what had actually happened. And what I did was I went back and I put it all on paper. I put it all in a Word document together sequentially, and thought, I'm going to find, now I have a book, now I'm going to find a publisher, right? So it turned out that I knew somebody who knew a local publisher, and I was told, go ahead and send it to her, send your manuscript. And she was interested, which shocked me, actually. And she worked with me for a number of years, and she gave me advice as to how to fill it out more fully, like to fill in the blanks. Like she would ask me questions like, what was your motivation? What happened to you before you just read Shirley MacLaine's book that made you think you might want to do this? And then like, what was your life like before? Like you were asking Adam, except I went in more detail in the book. And so by the time I finished working with her, I thought, a pretty good manuscript. And then when we get into this pattern of pilgrimage that I'm seeing, I can tell you a little bit more about how working through the writing of the book also shows me that same pattern, and how the next step, which I won't go into right this second, is all the problems that came up.
Yeah. I'm so tempted to go straight there. And I want to ask you one more question, or I want to just comment on one thing that I just loved about the book. So many things that I loved. One of them, I'm just so impressed by the quotes that you found to put at the beginning of every chapter. And I just marveled at how perfect those were. You're like a quote collector or something.
So yeah, I had mentioned before, I'll explain it to the group here. I had been collecting quotes. So every time I would read a book and some words in the book would stand out to me, I would write them on an index card, and I would write the author's name and the page number. And I developed this little deck of quotes, and I used them as cards to get a reading about my life. So when I would be in a foul mood about something or other and I needed some kind of guidance, I would shuffle my quote cards, and I would ask for the divine guidance to have the right card go to my hand, and I would pull a card, and sure enough, there would be this perfect wisdom, which was exactly what I needed to deal with whatever I was feeling right at the moment. So when I wrote the book and I decided I wanted to have quotes at the beginning, I thought, well, I'll go to my quote cards and see if there's something in there. And all the right quotes were there. So I guess that says that whatever I've been living in life, I relived on the Camino all those same problems because all the quotes were still perfect.
That's so funny. That's so perfect. I'm going to share my screen for a moment here because you shared with us, oh my gosh, Adam, you can tell me how I'm supposed to do this so that I review. How do I do that slideshow? Play from current slide. Okay, this is one that you sent us in advance that we were just kind of chatting and stuff that really speaks to you these days. Live life is as if everything is rigged in your favor. Isn't that beautiful? And this was done by a friend of yours. You wanted to give her credit, Kathy Nolte.
She's got this Etsy site, $5market.etsy.com, and she's got this calligraphy project where she does a small calligraphy every day, and then she sells them for $5, and I think she donates the money to her church. But there, if you are into calligraphic art, it's wonderful. Go check out her site. Yeah, but I really love that Rumi quote, and it felt really right to me as a fit for this pilgrimage pattern that we'll be discussing.
And I'm going to go back one. What you're talking about with the quotes and pulling your cards, I just made the connection. So Deborah put together a deck of pilgrimage cards, which I had fun with the last time I was in Spain. This is what the front of the card looks like. There's an opening card, a closing card. And the idea here is kind of like you did with your quotes, isn't it? Where you choose a card each day and then you live or you do whatever it says on that card. These were really fun. I enjoyed them.
Thank you. Yeah, and it is the same concept. It's that you're asking for some guidance from some source, higher source, beyond yourself. And what I was hoping people would do is they would do the pilgrimage cards, take them on pilgrimage with them. They're the size of playing card deck. So, and they're in a heavy duty plastic baggie so they won't get damaged. And that you would pull a card each day before you walked and think about what it says during the day, maybe journal about it at the end of the day. And in that fashion, learn the maximum about what you are there on the pilgrimage to learn, assuming this is divinely guided.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about this pilgrimage mindset. How do you want, can we just open it up to you and let you kind of lead us into it?
Sure. So I kept changing the number of steps and redoing it, but now I'm at 7 steps. And the interesting thing to me is that I noticed this as a result of the problems that came about with publishing my Camino book, because as I was in all those problems, I started thinking, boy, this feels like the Camino. And then later, as I was getting ready to go to the Pilgrims Gathering in Lake Tahoe this April, and I was having other problems, and some of them were internal, I again started feeling this is just like the Camino. So it made me take notice to see where else in my life might this have happened. And what I did, because Adam helped me out with something with a spreadsheet, and I thought, I need a spreadsheet. So I don't do computer spreadsheets, but I did a low-tech spreadsheet.
Wow.
And what I did was these 7 steps, figuring out 4 stages of my life. One when I started my business, one when I went on the Camino, one getting the Camino book published, and the last one going to Lake Tahoe for the Pilgrims Gathering, to see if all the steps were in all of those. And yes, in a fashion, they were. So here are the steps. The first one is the call, and that's the feeling of, in my case, it's like the heart swells, the feeling of kind of being lit up that something's calling to me and it's something that's meaningful or sacred or important to me, and that I have a knowing that I should definitely do it, but that it will take me out of my comfort zone. I make the decision to step into my discomfort zone, and in doing that, I make a commitment to myself. So that's number one. Number two is that divine help comes. Immediately after I make the commitment, those helpful synchronicities like Pilgrim Bill's phone number being in front of me, those start to occur. And things start falling into place with unusual ease, as if this part of my life maybe had already been set in motion by a higher source. I'm looking down. Only the divine source is only waiting for me to get on board. And perhaps this period of ease is what keeps me moving forward and keeps me from chickening out. Number three is the problems and obstacles stage. And this is where the real work of preparation and stepping onto the path begins. And it's not a smooth and easy path. There's issues, delays, hardships, and fears. That's a big one for me. And I begin at this point to see how big my objective is. But my deep desire is still to make this happen, to overcome my fears. And so I'm able to do this really hard thing, but I might need to have help. So in my case, I told you about asking for help. And my feelings of excitement and that this is right, that still keeps motivating me and pushing me forward. Step number 4.
Deborah, is it okay if I share? I have this written down, I think.
Yes,
Can I
please.
share this? Okay,
Yes.
let me do that while everybody's watching. Go ahead and continue. I'll pull it up.
So step 4 is that other help comes. And so many of the right people surround me. There's unanticipated connections that turn out to have offered just the help that I need. And I'm able to keep moving forward, even with my fears that somehow I will fail. In hindsight, this period of struggle, and when I look back, it is perfect. In years to come, I look back and I see that those people and those connections may help me to achieve future connections too. 5, I receive life lessons and wisdom. So this is taking place in my discomfort zone. I may feel this feeling of, I just want to get this over with. I've had that a couple of times. I think it's just part of the experience of living with discomfort. And after my first pilgrimage experience, because I've had that experience, I might be more open to meeting new friends who might help me. And they might be important to me later. But at the time when I meet these people, I can't know which ones of these people will end up being long-term friends or just people I met for a short while. At some point, I keep going because I want to see how the mystery resolves itself and what remarkable or subtle or beautiful learnings the divine has in store for me. I get sustained, enriched, expanded. I wonder, is this preordained? I can't know it at the time, but at the time I am learning some of the building blocks that will support my future dreams. Number 6, satisfaction of completion. I feel proud of myself. And I feel a comfort in the thought that I have been watched over and guided. I've seen that happen. And I know now that everything would work out okay, that it works out perfectly because it's already complete. I see it. I'm safe at home. I'm grateful. And I see, looking back, how all the learnings I received were just right for my personal growth. And that I have gifts to share, which in my case is wisdom stories that I get to tell. And number 7, I inhabit my new self. And what I mean by that is it takes time to take in all the lessons. And I've always been told it's important to take time to celebrate. I'm finally doing that. You have to take time to rest because after your Camino, well, after my Camino, I was exhausted. After the trip to Lake Tahoe, I was exhausted. And so I take whatever time I need. That's the important part. And it takes a while to learn, to really take in all the learnings I've had. But the gift of that is the next time I feel called to whatever it is, I know that there's going to be delightful synchronicities and hardships, and that there will be helpful people showing up and new knowledge and new friends. And ultimately, there will be satisfaction and gifts to share. And I might find it easier to tackle my perceived hardships and problems and to push through them, knowing that I'm being divinely guided. So instead of sitting in fear and worry, which had been my way to do things in the past, I hope to feel excited and to anticipate all the good that will come to me the next time and the next time and the next time. And talking about that reminded me, and that's the end of that slide, but you could leave it up if people want to look at it in more detail. I remember hearing a talk on NPR one time, and I don't remember who the speaker was. I don't remember if they were a doctor or a scientist or who, but they talked about how chemically in our bodies, the emotions of fear and excitement are identical. The chemical composition of fear and excitement are identical in our bodies, which shocked me to hear it, but it also gave me kind of an interesting nudge to think I could change. I could change my fears to excitement. They said that the way that you do that is it's how you look at what you're feeling. So if I think I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling fear. If I think I'm feeling excitement, I'm feeling excitement. So I practiced flipping to excitement from fear. And then when Kathy and Adam and I were talking in preparation for this talk, one of the other words that came to my mind, which I thought was kind of interesting, was curiosity as a middle step, that if it's too hard to flip from fear to excitement, maybe it would be easy enough to flip from fear to curiosity, and then from curiosity to excitement. But I just wanted to share that. But anyway, the long and short of it is, I think going through this pilgrimage pattern and knowing it exists, which it does for me, and I'm hoping some of you will have had similar experiences and can share those, it makes it easier next time you get called because you know the pattern's in place. Somebody's there helping you.
I love that. And I love having that written down as a reminder, because sometimes in the mess of it all, we forget that that's part of the pattern. And we can look at that and say, oh, this is where I am. This is why it feels this way. I think it's lovely that you've written that down. Did you have any comments on that, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, pilgrimage does follow that sacred pattern of a rites of passage, of separation, initiation, and return, and equally Joseph, at a deeper level, more broken down the hero's journey in those steps. But what I love about Deborah's is that, it speaks to, it's more human. You have the hero's journey, it's in the movies, it's all that, it's a standard pattern, but this really, looking at it speaks to what we experience on Camino. It resonates with me. And as you say, it's a roadmap that we all follow when we go through change, when we face change. So yeah, I love it.
Was there more, Deborah, you wanted to share about pilgrimage mindset or how you've been discovering this or anything else?
If we have time, I don't want to do too long, but I did have some notes about how the train pilgrimage.
I would love for you to share that. This was so neat.
So when I decided to go out to the Pilgrims gathering in Lake Tahoe, there was a question, should I take the train or fly? And I did my automatic writing to try and figure out if one was better for me than the other. And I was told that it was better to take the train. I'm trying to find where this is here. Okay. I was told, this is in automatic writing, that I would be secure and safe and that I would not feel overwhelmed. This was generally about going to Lake Tahoe, and that the Camino had been my first schooling. It had been my semester abroad. but that there was more, that this adventure, this train pilgrimage was graduate school. And it seems I was seeking a graduate degree and losing fear. And I was told I was not yet ready to graduate, as in check out from life, which I was happy to hear that. And that I needed to remember that all was set in motion for my highest good. So now I've decided I'm going to decide about the train going to Reno and then to Lake Tahoe. And I'm doing more automatic writing. So I'm feeling I was told in the in that automatic writing guidance that it was important that I take the train, and that would affect how I would be perceived by others and how I would perceive myself. And then in another automatic writing session, because I was really feeling nervous, I was told, and I was nervous because I wasn't sure how I was going to get from Reno to Lake Tahoe. And that was a big concern of mine. I was told, allow others to help you. You will need some help, and it will benefit the other person as well as benefiting you. And then I guess I must have been listening to too many news reports of train accidents, because I made the mistake of asking, will I be in any danger? And the answer I got was yes, which freaked me out. And then immediately after that, but it will be fine. And it said that all will be well, and don't go looking for danger. Don't go to fear. Feel the excitement. You will have stories to share. Woo! And that's how it works, just to remember that. So then the synchronicities, the night before I was packing to leave, I had read online this little booklet about angels, and it was talking about asking angels for help and to look for signs. And so the next day, as I'm getting ready to pack, I'm cleaning out this old suitcase that I have not used for years, and a gold foil angel falls out of the side pocket. So it was a sign, and it made me laugh, and it eased some of my worries. But then when I got to the train station, and I just have to read some of this, or it'll take me too long. I had people helping me with my luggage, which weighed too much. Once I got into Union Station, I had my first, I'm calling it a Camino lesson of the trip. And I'm going to try and tell you that real quickly. We were sitting in a waiting room that was for senior citizens and families with children. And there was this one fella there who I thought was maybe the grandpa of this toddler. And the kid was just bouncing off the walls and getting into places that he probably shouldn't have, and hitting his head and crying, and he'd throw his car and it would hit him in the head, and he was crying. And the grandpa just didn't seem to get how to take care of him or to calm him down. And I kept thinking, is it nap time? Does the child need food or whatever? Well, I happened to look around the room, and all around the room, it's filled with Mennonite families. And there's the ladies with their hair pulled back in buns and the little white kerchief over it, and the men in their suspenders. And there's families. So there's some children there, and their children are all sitting beautifully behaved. And they're all kind of looking at this grandpa and kind of looking down at him. And I probably was too. And the crying was annoying to me. So as soon as they said we could board for our train, I jumped up to line up. So I get on the train, and one of the Mennonite families is across the aisle from me, mom and dad, and their two little boys. And the kids are maybe like 2.5 and 1. And the younger one's got a snotty nose, and, they're both kind of fit and subdued. Well, later on the train, these kids are crying, and the other kids on the train are crying. And I'm cutting them some slack because I know the kids are sick, and, mom and dad have been so patient with them. And I think back about the grandpa in the train station. I'm thinking, why didn't I cut him slack? And I'm embarrassed to say this, but he was a man of color. And I wonder if, subconsciously I had some prejudice I needed to deal with. So I'm glad I, noticed it so I can deal with it. But what I realized was that maybe this child had ADHD. Maybe this was the first time grandpa had ever watched him, and he had no idea what soothed the kid. Maybe this kid had a snotty nose and allergies and an earache. I couldn't know that. And so my first lesson was that I should refrain from assuming and give everyone my love. So those are the kinds of lessons that I got on the Camino too. there were so many ways that the train travel felt like pilgrimage. So I'm going to just tell you some of those. First of all, I felt called to it. I knew there were things that I was afraid of that I needed to overcome. It was strangers, all of us sharing an experience together. And folks I'm unlikely to ever meet again, but some of them I might. And there were two of them that if we have time, I'll tell you the stories of how that could happen. Some people were speaking Spanish, which I loved. We had group sleeping quarters. Yay. So I got a coach, which is not as fancy as this private sleeping cars, which cost like 3 or 4 times as much. And I would say it's like comparing an albergue to sleeping in a parador, for those of you who relate to that. During our 2+ day communal living arrangements, we slept together, we ate together, and people talked when we were trying to sleep. We were awakened by other passengers' night sounds, snoring, sneezing, coughing, farting, and sometimes, as we were on the train, by little ones crying. Food didn't seem quite as important, nor did personal cleanliness, because there was no place to wash except a little bathroom. And so, 3 days on the road in the same clothes with just having bird bath, that you do what you can do, and everybody's kind of in the same place.
Wow.
Lots less that you could do than in normal life. And in this case, instead of feeling pain from physical activity, if there was any pain, it was physical inactivity. The scenery was magnificent. And that was, one of the big things for me about the Camino. And the scenery on the train, this was going out from Chicago out to Reno. And we went through 26 plus tunnels while we ascended the Rockies. We saw salt farming on the Great Salt Lake. We were overlooking the Colorado River so we could see the rapids and those huge, wide open skies. It just was wonderful. That there were people there to help us if we needed. There were conductors, and it was like a hospitalero del tren. And we all wanted our fellow passengers to reach their destinations. So there were times when needed that we helped each other out. And there was just a lot beyond my control, a lot like the Camino. And the worst of it was the 8-hour delay in arriving to Reno, which necessitated, and it was due to a rock slide on the tracks, which, most of us on the train we were uncomfortable with the idea of arriving so late, but we were thrilled that it hadn't happened while we were underneath it.
Yeah.
So that was good. But that brought up a lot of fears about, would I be able to connect up with the people I had made arrangements with to ride from Reno to Tahoe? And I have to say that I am a virgin when it comes to using Uber. So I have the Uber app now on my phone, but I never used it before. And if I'd had to do it, I guess I would have figured it out, but I wasn't happy about that. So real briefly, this was the second Camino lesson of my trip. I was wondering if my friends would wait for me in Reno. And originally I had been scheduled to arrive at Reno about 7:30 in the morning. Then I would have to make my way to the hotel where Amy, she's still on here, and her friend Miriam were staying. I had been cautioned that it was not the best neighborhood to walk around in, and that I would probably need to take an Uber, which is why I had the Uber app on my phone, because I had this heavy luggage and I didn't want to walk through a bad neighborhood with all of it. And at about 11:30 that morning, then Laura, who was a local to Reno pilgrim, was going to pick us up at the hotel and drive us all up to the pilgrims gathering, which sounded great. But as it turned out, we were running 8 hours late at that point. And so my question was, will they wait for me? Is it going to interfere with the beginning of the gathering? And so one of the new friends on the train taught me how to use the Track Here Train app, which was great. And then Amy and Laura and I began to text each other regularly with updates. As we got closer to Reno, we got farther behind schedule, and I was really freaked out. And I felt terrible to ask them to wait for me, but they did. And Laura, who was our driver, told me later that she felt it was God's way of saying to wait, that we were supposed to be on the road to Tahoe later, which was the perfect thing to say to me to keep me from feeling endless guilt. And it was another losing fear and gaining trust lesson for me, which is funny because I think back on it, how long I've been working on this particular lesson, and I can track it all the way back to about 30 years ago, a poster that was in the bathroom at our house of sayings from older people. And the only one that I remember was an 80-year-old man whose comment was, don't waste time on worry. Most of what we worry about never happens. Like, pretty profound. So there were some stories of friendships on the train. One of the people I was friends with on the way there told me all kinds of things about the explorers to first arrive in the Reno, Lake Tahoe area. And when we got to the gathering, when the first speaker repeated all that same information, which I thought was pretty funny. Then the same fella turns out to be on the train with me on the way home. And on the way home, which was really great, he repeated some of that for me, which I shared later with one of my writing critique group partners who writes historical fiction. And I thought it would be a great setup for one of his stories. So that could happen in the future. And the other thing he did, which was just fabulous, he's a big bird watcher. So we were going through Nebraska, I think it was, and he goes, and I think around this corner, if you look up into those trees, you'll see blue heron nests. And sure enough, there was this big grove with giant nests, and you could see blue birds in them because they were so big. And it reminded me of being on the Camino and seeing all the stork's nests. So it was wonderful. And then the one other one I will tell you that I just thought was a great synchronicity. I was talking to one of the Spanish speakers on the train, a man named Francisco, and he tells me he's a long distance truck driver and that he does decorating. And as he explained it more, I realized he does remodeling. And I tell him, well, that's interesting because I do some decorating too, and I do picture framing. That's what I've done for years. And we get started talking about picture framing, and I tell him, I think at the end of the year, I'm going to officially retire from it. I'm going to sell all my equipment and my materials. He might be interested in buying them. So he told me that in his Hispanic community on the Texas-Mexican border, most framing is done by undertakers. So in the funeral homes, they frame up pictures of the deceased. But he might want to try his hand at it. So I have his phone number. So hopefully, in the fall, I'll talk to him. So anyway, the trip was just full of synchronicities. And one other thing that I just loved from the trip that was synchronous for me was one of the speakers was going to be talking about the, not Pacific Coast Trail, Oregon Trail, and how he wanted to set up albergue-like places for people to hike the trail and then stay overnight, and that he wanted to continue it east, and it might run through Missouri and maybe through the Katy Trail, which is the place that I've been thinking would be so cool to set up, to have pilgrimages, like more of a Native American feel to them possibly. But the Katy Trail is really set up right now for bicycle riders because places to stay are like 30 to 50 miles apart. You need something that's closer to, 10, 12, 15 miles apart. So anyway, there were a lot of synchronicities. And again, if you want to come over and look at my spreadsheet, you can see all the details. But that's what I got on the train travel.
I can see why that really reminded you of the Camino. And I really acknowledge you, Deborah, for your ability to see through pilgrims' eyes, to see the patterns and then write about that. That's really a gift. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. The thing that I'm curious about, is I'd like to hear other people's experiences. If everybody on the call would speak about, like pilgrimage, have you had a pattern to your pilgrimage that has repeated from other areas of your life, or after your pilgrimage into other areas of your life? And I'm curious too, if as you're looking back in your life, if you can see yourself repeating certain lessons over and over, like with me losing fear. And one of the reasons I thought this was kind of interesting, it was towards the end of my Camino, I started asking people if they had had the experience of, or how they got called actually to the Camino. And I heard a number of people who at that time had read Shirley MacLaine's book like I had, and all of them to a one talked about their fear of the wild dogs that she wrote about in this book, that there were packs of wild dogs. And it made me wonder if all of us were on the Camino at the same time with this same issue of losing fear. So that's what I've got. And if anybody has questions, feel free to ask. And if you have any pilgrimage patterns of your own that you'd like to share, I would love to hear.
Yeah, so let's just open that up to the audience. You can either raise your virtual hand or just unmute yourself. Yeah, Dale.
First of all, Deborah, I loved your book. It is such a good book about the pilgrim's experiences and how we learn about ourselves on the pilgrimage with this time, as you say, time out of our ordinary time. Our ordinary time here is so different from over there. We're out of that. We're into something else over there. I got to read this because it meant so much to me. Your quote out of the nun's prayer at the very end means a lot to me about how we see other people. Give me the ability to see good things in unexpected places and talents in unexpected people. And give me, O Lord, the grace to tell them. Let them know what we see and how we appreciate them. I think that's so important for me. Life lessons I've learned over there that I repeat the process to learn more about is when I'm over there, each time I'm looking at myself, what have I got to do with what do I got to do about me? What needs to happen? What do I need to change about myself to make myself more comfortable, to make my life back here in ordinary time more comfortable and with other people as well? So over there, I'm learning that maybe I'm not the best guy in this relationship. I'm not doing my best. Maybe I should be making amends to somebody, that maybe I've harmed them in some way. You know, I have shortcomings and I have character defects. And as you mentioned, the fellow in the train station, I didn't think I was prejudiced, but over there, when I'm looking at myself, I do have prejudices. You know, is it their income, the color of their skin, where they live, how they speak English, how they don't speak English, how they speak a different tongue, what their country is doing to a different country, you know, it goes on and on and on. Yes, I do have prejudices. So that's something I need to learn about myself and bring back here and do the work on. So the lessons, as you say, to inhabit your new identity, your new self back here, I have to do some work. And I'm the one that has to do the work. Things aren't going to change because I've learned something. Things are going to change because I have to do things here. So it's discovery over there, it's recovery here. I have to take the actions. So it's about your book, one last thing about your book, give everybody a chance to say something here. You know, when I go over there, I think, oh, I might be vulnerable to the weather. Oh, I might be vulnerable to the train not being on time. Oh, I might be vulnerable. No, you had so much vulnerability over there with your financial difficulties. I'm so glad that you itemize it the way you did. because you lived with that anxiousness of day to day, not knowing where you can even buy your food, or what you can afford for food, or where you can stay. I can't afford to stay there. I have to go somewhere else. I don't have a lot of money, but I didn't have those problems at all. I was able to go and pretty much do what I wanted to do. But to have that extra anxiety on top of being new to pilgrimage over there, that's amazing. You truly are amazing, Deborah.
Thank you.
And thanks for including that in the way that you did.
I'm so glad you brought up the 17th century nuns prayer, because that was I think I bought that at a fair one time, and a Renaissance fair, and it was calligraphied as if it had been written by the 17th century nun. And anyway, it's online, it's everywhere, but it really spoke to me too. It was like, yeah, this is what I need to hear. And the part I'm working on right now is to have the good grace to listen to other people's tales of woe, basically their illness and whatnot. Because I'm at the age now where I know a lot of people who are getting sick.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Good for you. Thank you.
Hi, Deborah. Hi, Deb. I started your book after the annual gathering in Lake Tahoe and got halfway through, and then life got in the way. And then I finished it recently. So I tell you, I do love it. I think two things really struck me about it. One was, yes, you talked about the money and the worries and as just mentioned, but you came to terms with it and realized, well, it's in God's hands, or something's going to resolve. It's going to happen. Somehow you're going to make it. And I love that part, that finally just giving it up and saying, the worrying is not going to help. I'm just going to have to trust. And I love that part. The other thing that I found interesting when I did the Camino, and you mentioned it several times, the time alone. I was traveling with a companion, so we were sharing room, and I did it in last October. But there were times when I walked ahead and I really needed just the time alone to reflect. And that resonated in your book, and it resonated with me. I think that you set aside, you said, I need some alone time for my own thoughts, for what I need to reflect on and to relish the journey. So those are the two parts that I think really, really did hit me and resonated. So thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Caesarina. And I have to say, Caesarina was my roommate at the gathering, and we'd never met before. And she was one of my helpful people. I mean, we helped each other, but she like helped me find somebody to teach me how to use my squares so I could take payments. But she did the kindest thing. It was just the sweetest thing that I think I saw the whole time at the gathering. And not everybody there saw it. So I'm going to share that. Do you remember the night that you did the hula dance for the people in the building where we were staying? And it was an older couple, and they were celebrating like their 50+ wedding anniversary or something. And so you did a special hula dance for them. Do you remember what the name of the song was?
Well, it's the Wedding Song by Andy Williams. So it's an old classic.
And everybody who was there, and there were maybe like 8 or 10 of us, we were all crying. It was just so beautiful. Yeah, wonderful people are everywhere.
Well, that's what's special about the camaraderie of being a pilgrim, whether you're going to be a pilgrim or have already done the journey. I think that was the wonderful thing about the American Pilgrims Gathering, is that we were all able to share. And I loved having Deb as a roommate. So thank you.
Me too.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Has anybody got another story of their experiences?
I will share something. So, Deborah, I had gotten the cards from you at the gathering. And I'll just admittedly say that I kind of had them sitting there aside, but hadn't done anything with them. And I guess it just wasn't the right moment, right? But recently I've been participating in an 8-week program that is focused on transforming my relationship with myself and with other people in my life. And part of the learnings from that is that every day I need to start the day with an intention. And as we were talking today, it dawned on me, I can use her cards to do that, because this is the pilgrimage of life. So thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks, Amy.
I love that, Amy. Thanks for sharing.
So this makes me want to go back to the back of the book, and there's book club questions, and I should have looked at this before to see if there are any other questions in there. Oh yeah, this is. Do you think of your big dream of going on pilgrimage if you were first telling your family and friends? Do you think that they would think of it as a rational or an irrational choice?
A good question to ask.
Are you asking us, Deborah, or just wanting us each to reflect?
I would love to hear other people's experience of that.
Oh, Harriet's got her hand up. I don't know if you're wanting to answer that, Harriet, or if you had something else in mind.
Yeah, I'll thank you for asking that question. Actually, it struck something with me because I was actually reluctant to tell anyone about going on the Camino. I thought that there'd be a lot of blowback, and I had like you said, you have enough of your own fears of, am I doing this right, and is this, what's going to happen, along with that incredible calling of having to go, and I was shocked because I told about 5 of my closest relatives and friends, and every single one of them said, "Yeah, you should go," and I was really, really surprised. I really, I had all this, like you said, all this fear, right? I had this fear that they were going to, be pushing back, and they didn't. There was total support. And when I came back and told like the greater, I didn't put anything online, I didn't post anything. It was only these 5 or 6 people that I told. And when I came back, I posted on Facebook, and I got, just pages and pages of responses to this picture of me in Santiago, yay. And people saying, how'd you do it? And how far was it? And, can you come to my house and talk to some of my friends? And it was just a very different response. I didn't even know people knew about it. It's such a wide part of my, friends and family. So that would be my answer.
That's lovely. Thanks, Harriet. I think it really does show who your supporters are when you go on these big quests. Those that want you or those that need you. It's that discernment process. Anybody else?
Rick, you asked a question earlier, and I know you really wanted to hear stories from other people, and maybe there is a moment. I want to go back to what the question was, just stories about how we see the pilgrimage pattern. Was that the question?
Yeah, it was whether you can sort of, my sense of it was, a thread. I mean, I in the sense of, if you look back on your life, these life events, do they keep repeating that pattern? But,
yeah.
I mean, I certainly feel with myself, go back far enough that there was a call to the Camino. It was always Spain, but ultimately I realize now it was to the Camino going back 30 years. Ever since I was a teenager, I always wanted to be in Spain. I just didn't know why. So I think, and doing that work with Lou Flessner, when I spoke at the gathering on rites of passage, and we did that work, and part of the activities that he's put together is very important to do a life review, but to look at this sort of stuff and see those patterns and how they repeat. So I think it's a good, valid question you asked, Deborah.
Did you just say that you had felt a call to go to Spain when you were a child?
Yeah, as a 7-year-old, I lived in Spain for a year, and then I was suddenly ejected to go back to England to boarding school. But I've always wanted to be back in Spain ever since I was like 10, 11, 12. I couldn't answer that question why, but now I think it's because of everything I do now with Camino. simply that. I couldn't tell you anything more than that. But I think this speaks to what you're saying, that there's something inside, there's an essence to us that is bursting to get through. And we have to give it that chance, maybe, just to listen.
And that speaks to, like, how do you know when something is important to you? You know, what is it that makes you aware that this is an idea that you want to pursue, or a track that you want to go on? Or
I think it just never goes away. It just never goes away. I think that's, for me, that's the thing. It just doesn't go away.
It's occurring to me to share, which is when I came home from the Camino, I had to choose a heartfelt project, and I chose to write about the Camino for a program that I was in. And I wrote basically what happened to me each day, you know, and just recalling the people and what happened. And I think this might be a little bit about what you're talking about, Deborah, but every now and then it was like a feeling, there's more here to that story. Like, it's not just the conversation, like there's something deeper. And so it reminded me of when you were talking about, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And then there was a feeling of something coming forward. And as I spent the 8 months writing about my Camino, that was the feeling that I would get, is like, there's something richer here. And I would just kind of keep writing and see what would come forward. And it was always amazing just to notice, like, a new insight would come, or a metaphor would speak to me, or wisdom for everyday life. And I don't have anything in particular that's coming to mind right now, but that was the process for me. That feels a little bit about like what you're asking about. And I just want to say a big, oh yeah, to, do I see the same patterns repeating in my life again? Like, oh yeah, I think I get through it, and oh my gosh, I'm free from it. And then 6 months later, it smacks me upside the head again. And I'll just look and say, well, I thought we dealt with this already. But, and that reminds me of your love that you talk about in the book, of the spiral of, you know, on the Camino, that you would look forward and see spirals. And it's like, yeah, I passed through this ring of it, and now we're just going a little bit deeper into it.
The idea of something kind of sticking with you, and I don't know, I think it's like one of the muse things. It's like the muse keeps pulling it back out for you to look at again, because you're not complete with it. That's one way to consider it. But yeah, to me, there are things that don't go away, and then there's things that go away, and the things that go away aren't important for my life. Okay, do I have time? No.
2 minutes.
There's this Carolyn Mace, who's a writer about spiritual life, and she talks about how before we're born, our little soul selves sit down with God and have a chat, and God says, well, what do you think you want to accomplish or do or grow? How do you want to be in this life? And so I consider little me, and I'm thinking about this life, thinking, I think I want to lose fear. And I want to learn something about loving too, because I've been in and out of way too many relationships. And so I can see me saying to God, those are my two big things. And then all of this gets set into motion for me to observe. And one of the things in the book too that I talked about was seeing people who had the kind of relationship that was meaningful to me. So it's like, where am I on high alert? Where am I paying attention in life? And those things that are what I wanted to do, that's what got set up for me to learn or experience or to whatever. Does that feel like it's true for you too, Kathy? Is that?
Absolutely. I'm not muted. Absolutely. I've heard the word spiritual curriculum, and that it's something that, and so yes, those same patterns will keep coming around with different relationships or people, and just so that I keep getting the learning. That really resonates with me. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. This has really been wonderful. We're going to wrap up, but if anybody wants to stay on and say a thank you afterwards or have any more comments, we can stay. Adam, do you want to announce the upcoming events, or shall I do that?
So our next Camino Wisdom Stories is on July the 15th. And the theme, like it or hate it, is my mobile phone and I on the Camino. So that should be an interesting experience. Some stories there. That's on July the 15th, same time next month. Yeah. So,
August 5th, August 19th is the Camino provides, except when it doesn't. So you can begin thinking about stories that you have for either one of those. I think that they'll both be interesting. Yeah. So a big thank you again to Deborah for being here, and for all of you. Deborah, any final words?
It helped a whole lot to have you all be here and be interested. And I just thank you for being here. This is one of a number of talks I've given, and every time I've been nervous, but I think I calmed down pretty fast because I know there's all of these loving pilgrim friends here. So thank you.
Yes, I just remembered there was one question in the chat. Where can people get your pilgrimage cards? The book we can find on Amazon, correct?
Right. You can go to my website, which is Terra Art Publishing, TerraArt publishing.com. And they're on there. Or if you live in the St. Louis area, call me and email me something.
Excellent. Thank you. If you'd like to unmute yourself and say goodbye or thank you, please do. I'll stop the recording and then we can stay on for any last moment.
Hi, Deb. Wonderful talk and wonderful book.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Camino.
I'm going to read your book.
Greetings from Southern Illinois.
Thank you, my neighbor.
Yeah.